have been a contender.
Hulk, go smash.
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me.
Here's Johnny.
21 gigawatts!
Hey, motherfucker.
You never go ass to mouth.
Now what is so damn funny?
And here we go.
We will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight.
The Force will be with you. Always.
But the truth! You can't handle the truth! Showtime, everybody! Showtime!
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first ever For Real Movie Club. I am your moderator tonight, Chris the Dace Man Dace, and joining me are my panelists of Mike Paden.
What's shaking, world?
Travis Goss.
Hello, hello.
Michael Burhan.
Hi.
And Anthony Mango.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Never mind that shit. Here comes Mango.
It's Mongo, thank you.
Ooh, and we have a fun-filled inaugural episode for you tonight. We will be discussing Mel Brooks films, so let's dive right into the action, and we'll start with 1974's Blazing Saddles, a Western comedy film directed by Mel Brooks, starring Cleveland Little and Gene Wilder. The screenplay was produced by Andrew Bergman, Mel Brooks, Richard Pryor, Norman Steinberg, and Al Ugger. That's a terrible last name.
Wait, did you say anal hugger?
I think so. It was close.
Okay.
Brooks appears in many supporting roles, including the governor and a Yiddish-speaking Indian chief. The supporting cast also includes Slim Pickens, Alex Karras, and David Huddleston. So what we'll do is first we'll go around the round table and we'll get the initial reactions to the film itself, and we will start with you, Mr. Paden.
Oh boy. Well, let me just preface this by saying I developed a reputation across most of the shows that I am involved with of being the person who tries to be positive amongst things. Tonight is not going to be one of those nights. I know Mel Brooks is very well beloved, and I have a lot of respect for Mel Brooks, and I like a lot of the things he does. So it's not going to be all hate, but I also am going to have a very hard time just shooting rainbows up his butt throughout this entire thing, specifically with this movie. This movie was a absolute chore to watch. It actually took me 3 times to sit through this movie, and I've seen it before years and years ago on Comedy Central, and of course that was an edited version when I was like 10. So I don't have a lot of memories about it back then. Watching it now, though, it was just tough. I think the most recurring problem I have with Mel Brooks, and I'm going to be bringing up, is he doesn't know how to write likable characters. He knows how to write a good joke, and specifically a joke that happens right away, like a quick pun or something along those lines. He's not very good at setting up something long-term or even good running gags, and he's awful at writing characters. There's not a single character in Blazing Saddles that I liked. Everyone was just flat, no likable traits. Even Gene Wilder, who I am going to sing the absolute highest praises of Gene Wilder a little bit later. Even in this movie, he was boring. He had no excitement. You know, this whole time he's just talking, the Waco Kid. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. I don't want to take up hogging this whole point on the first note, but I will be the negative voice on this one.
Mr. Goss, what was your first impression of watching the movie?
I complete 180 degree feeling that Mr. Paden has, because I absolutely love this movie. And one thing, let's just get it out in the open right now. When you think Blazing Saddles, we automatically think about the farting scene. That is, I mean, I know we have a lot of fart jokes in other movies since then and all that stuff, but this one, I think this was one of those movies that had something like that for the first time, where it was just openly funny, and they exaggerated it. Because that's one thing you notice about in Mel Brooks movies is he does exaggerate on a few things, not to the point where it's uncomfortable. That's how I look at it. But this movie, I mean, this was a film that, this is the second Mel Brooks movie I've ever seen when I was a kid. The first one was Spaceballs, and we're going to get into that a little bit later on. But I thought this movie was hilarious. He definitely takes a lot of the stereotypes that you'd find in these Old West movies and exploits the hell out of them, and introducing something This movie actually had social commentary at that time, which is race, and which is actually still a pretty big topic, even by today's standards. But in this movie, they were introducing the fact that there's this character named Bart, who was a railroad worker. He was a black railroad worker. Boy, that just rolls off the tongue. And he's, one of the characters played by Harvey Korman, who is a phenomenal comedic actor himself. He brings this guy in as the new sheriff for Rock Ridge, and he has I can't get the words out. The story of the film really is there's this town called Rock Ridge, and these developers of the railroad are trying to build a railroad through this land, and the land is inhabited by the people of Rock Ridge, and they're trying to scare them all out so that they can take the land. They tried every method possible, and they still want to stay and fight it out. And when the sheriff was killed, they sent a letter to the governor, in which case the governor wants to try to find this new sheriff for Rock Ridge. And then what happens after that is Harvey Korman comes up with this brilliant idea of putting a black sheriff in there, thinking that everybody's going to disrespect him, they're going to leave town, and all that stuff. But a lot of things that happen in that movie are around this fact that there's a black sheriff. But he does everything to have people say that, just stay around, let's fight these people, we're going to save this town. But it's just a funny movie. I really love it. They have a lot of really great characters and everything.
Okay. Mr. Burhan, what was your first reaction to the film?
Truthfully, it's slapstick comedy. It should be taken as such. If you're looking for story, subtext, and brilliant writing, then Mel Brooks films aren't for you. It kind of has, in a sense, it's satire. It plays to the whole sense of, let's go in there, let's be as funny as possible, let's throw in some jokes, and let's have the story revolve around the jokes themselves instead of the other way around. It even had, as Travis said, a fart joke. There's only certain movies that can get away with fart jokes without them becoming repetitive. Mel Brooks sort of cultivated the jokes and threw them in there as little nuances, in a sense. It was good. It's not the most amazing piece of screenwriting ever, but it was a laugh and a half.
And finally, Mr. Mango, what was your thoughts on the movie?
Well, I'm just going to keep it short here. I'm sure we're going to go in more in depth, and I'll break down all the pluses and negatives for that later on. But first reaction is I liked this a lot more my second time watching this than I did the first time, but it still is not going to be my go-to Mel Brooks movie. There's one of these movies above all the rest that it makes the other ones pale in comparison. And when we get to that, I'll talk more. But Blazing Saddles does have its positives, and it does have its negatives.
Cool. So as we got our first initial reactions on things, one of the points that we've touched base on, and it's been touched on almost all of your initial reactions, is the subtle, or the not so subtle, racial overtones. Now, this being a film in 1974, before everybody got more or less butthurt over everything, politically correct was not in mind. So we're going to go around the panel real quick, and we'll start with Mr. Goss this time. The racial overtones, did it bother you? What were your thoughts on how this film portrayed that?
Like I said before, it was social commentary about how race was, especially then in the late 60s and 70s. The way that Mel Brooks did this film is, and I remember listening to the commentary of this film on DVD. He was trying not to make that such a big thing as a word, because in the script he was always trying to find ways where the word nigger. I personally hate that word. I really do. But he did it to the point in the film where he wasn't doing that to be overly racist or anything. He was trying to put like a comedic spin on it. So I didn't take great offense to it, because he and all the other writers of this movie, they were trying their best to be very delicate with that word, and also with this situation of racism in the Old West. And I think they handled the whole thing very delicately, I think.
Mr. Burhan, what were your thoughts on the overtones?
Some motherfucker better stay in their lane, that's all I'm saying. In terms of the racial overtones, again, I agree with Travis on that. It wasn't due to them being overly racist. It's more to highlight the fact that racism was in that sort of time. But at that time, they were more free with the wording that they would say. Certain words, certain phrases would be said in those style of movies, and they were more acceptable. Whereas nowadays, it's kind of every sort of film that you hear that word in is more of a white guilt movie. But in terms of that, it's completely as well part of Mel Brooks' humor. He kind of has that whole racist overtones in his movies. It's kind of defined who he is in a sense. But again, he does overly make fun of himself because he's Jewish. He does it a lot. He makes fun of himself, and he tries not to sugarcoat over the way he feels about any other culture. And again, it's not probably an opinion of his, but more sort of letting out the general consensus.
True. Mr. Mango?
Well, the movie doesn't exist without the racist jokes. I mean, that's the backbone of the whole thing. Without that, you really have no purpose of seeing this movie. You might kind of go into it expecting it to be making fun of Westerns, and it's all going to be about Westerns, but really, how much of it is about the Western motif as opposed to the racist jokes and the Western motif kind of supporting it? But what's good about that is it isn't a racist movie making fun of blacks. It's taking something that's terrible and playing around with it. We have dark comedies all the time that make fun of like murder or embarrassing situations or anything else that's bad. So why not take something like racism and use that to build a bridge for comedy? Stand-up comedians do it all the time. So I see no point in if anybody is like upset about this kind of a movie. It's all for the jokes. And the best thing about that is it starts off immediately setting the pace that we're not making fun of any particular person here. And if anybody is going to come to the assumption that this is a movie where we're making fun of blacks and African Americans and slave times and whatever just because, oh, let's pick on them, who are the people that look stupid at the very beginning? The white guys. And that's a great way to set the tone.
Absolutely. Mr. Paden?
I mean, to say that it's like a small part of it would be an understatement. Tony is absolutely right. I'm not saying that you said it was small. I'm saying anybody who would say that would be an understatement. Tony hit the nail on the head. This movie is based on these racial jokes. I actually joked with Tony in conversation earlier that he was coming up with this whole theory about how the first half of the movie was really good, and then the second or the third quarter of it dropped down, and then the last quarter of it was terrible. And I was like, yeah, and it's kind of like at that halfway point where they drop the racist jokes and they start going more for like this hero shtick. And that's kind of like where it stops being funny. Is like, am I a terrible person because I stopped liking anything about the movie once they stopped doing the racist jokes? From the very start, though, I mean, in the very first scene, you hear him dropping nigger, you hear him dropping chink, you hear him dropping anything that they could think of to fit into that scene. But it's all done so quick. I mean, yeah, it's done hateful. I shouldn't say that it's not done in a hateful way, but you could definitely tell that this is a comedy. It's not doing it like in Django, where it's very obviously being done where this person's trying to make this person look terrible in front of you. As Tony said, in this case, the white guys are looking like the idiots. And besides that, there's nothing else to go into the movie. Yep. I'm agreeing with Tony on that so much. There's nothing else to like in this movie. The Western thing is not only just like like an afterthought to what you're seeing in this movie. There gets to a point in this movie where they just completely drop the Western thing, and they're fighting all over sets throughout a Hollywood backlot, which, you know, breaking the fourth wall is nothing foreign to Mel Brooks either. But that's probably the biggest level they ever taken. They probably spent, what was like a good 15, 20 minutes outside of that Western set. So that's where I sit with that.
Some interesting notes that come out of this movie itself is one of the writers happens to be Richard Pryor, and if anybody's familiar with Richard Pryor, he is a very brash and sometimes controversial comedian who did stand-up plenty of times. But he was originally slated to play the role Cleveland Little did as Bart. But the studio, trying to get financing in Hollywood to get this movie off the ground, they found it hard to progress with Pryor in that role.
That would have made that movie so much better, because Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor have an amazing chemistry together. Anything they've done where they work together is instantly gold. And just to have those on set, I imagine they would have let them do a lot of improvising, and that probably would have just made so much more in that movie.
And to piggyback off that idea, one thing that I wanted to talk about with these movies, and as we go through this podcast, is casting. And as you hit the nail on the head, especially as a moderator, I'm trying to keep it neutral, but Richard Pryor, I think, would have been awesome in this movie. So we'll start with you, Mr. Paden. Casting, was it done right? Would you change anything? Would you X anybody? Go ahead.
Bart was terrible. This guy had a nice smile, and that's about the only thing likable he had about him. I don't know how he got picked for this part. There had to have been tons more actors you could have gone. Richard Pryor, you mentioned a name like that. That's like absolutely number one. Shit, put George Jefferson in there. That would have been a better role for it than that guy. Gene Wilder, you can't blame him for picking Gene Wilder, but this is only, 2 or 3 years, I believe, after Willy Wonka, and the very same year as Young Frankenstein, which just shocks me. For how different of looks these movies have, considering they were made in the same year. Gene Wilder was a very busy man that year, but as I was saying before, I think this was a phoned-in performance for him. Out of all the movies I've seen with him in it, I think this is the weakest he's ever done. I don't even know anyone else who was cast in there. Mongo is cool. It's like a big oaf. He's kind of like a predecessor to Hodor from Game of Thrones. I don't remember anybody else. Well, Mel Brooks always has his role. He's usually playing some type of president or a person that's in a high level of power. Mm-hmm. He's what is he? He's like the mayor or whatever they're calling him.
Governor.
The governor.
Yeah,
the governor. He did fine, I suppose. The one main sheriff dude who always seems to be getting some kind of weird injury happening to him. He was fine, I guess. No one that I'm going to stick out and even search all these other movies. I think I had to go and search IMDb to look out who that person was and what else they've done at least once. Mm-hmm. I don't think I did once for Blazing Saddles.
Another name that is part of attached to this movie is Dom DeLuise, who is also a good a buddy. He plays Buddy Bizarre, who is a friend of Mel Brooks. So Mel Brooks has a habit of kind of incorporating some of his friends into the movies. Dom DeLuise is one of those, just for those out there keeping score on trivia.
Well, a lot of people actually do that as well, because as you find, especially with a lot of modern directors, they tend to migrate to people they like to work with.
Yeah. How many freaking Scorsese films is freaking Leo going to be in?
Exactly.
Well, the same thing. As soon as Scorsese finds something that works, he tends to sort of overly do it. And I have heard Leonardo DiCaprio just say that he's probably not going to do any more Scorsese movies.
But if he keeps the trend going, we could definitely do a 4-reel movie club on Scorsese and DiCaprio.
Leo Scorsese.
Yeah, they do have kind of a bromance going on.
We'll stick with you, Mr. Burhan. How do you feel about the casting? Did they hit it right? Anything you would change?
I would have casted Richard Pryor, because he's the. I know in Hollywood they kind of they got him and they didn't get him, if that makes sense. Because once he started blowing up with Gene Wilder, they started casting him in roles just to promote him. I remember. Does anyone remember with Superman, when he was cast in that for no specific reason, just to have him do his comedy routines? Mm-hmm. And with this type of movie, I think it was overly needed, because it would have balanced out the kind of racism in a sense, because he's very quick-witted, he's very funny, and he's also very I wouldn't say the way I want to say it is, I don't want to sound like I'm racist, but he's very homely looking in a sense. He's kind of the guy that they were looking for, and in terms of the other guy, I didn't see that from him. All I saw was he was trying to play up a stereotype, but he was kind of like he was overdoing it. Again, as Paden stated, Gene Wilder has great chemistry with the guy. The two of them work so well together. They gel so well together. And in terms of this, it didn't really have that. it kind of seemed a bit more dry because of the way that the characters work. And yes, I again in agreement with Paden, Gene Wilder did act like he was phoning things in. It didn't seem like the type of role that he was more comfortable in. But again, it could be the people that he was playing with. It could have been the writing. It could have been that he didn't understand the character or he had different beliefs. It could have been a number of things. But as a Mel Brooks film, as well as this film goes, I think everybody was casted rightly so, in a sense. Apart from that one guy, I feel that Pryor was made for that role, and as you can say, Pryor did write the script intending for the character to be for him.
Mr. Mango, what are your thoughts on the casting?
I don't know enough of the actors from that era to really be able to pick alternatives, because that was 13 years before I was born in '74.
Age.
Yeah, I would not be able to do a fan cast like I would have been able to do for, the modern movies that we can pull out now, but I think some people pulled off their roles okay. Slim Pickens, he was solid. I don't know the name of the actor, but the one who played Hedley Lamar, I thought that he was actually really good in the movie.
That was Harvey Korman.
Whoever played Mel Brooks' secretary, that woman, her chest did its job. But but there aren't really any standouts. And funny enough about Gene Wilder, he was originally supposed to play another role. I can't remember what it was. It might have been Hedley Lamar, but he actually wanted the Waco Kid role. So he specifically went out of his way to get that spot, and I have to agree with everybody else. It's kind of just a blasé performance. It's not necessarily bad, and I'm sure that there could have been significantly worse people that could have played the role, but there probably were people that were better as well.
Well, here's the thing. If it was your first time seeing Gene Wilder, you probably just figure like, oh, whatever. But in the same week that we watched Young Frankenstein, and if you've seen Willy Wonka in your life, it's just shocking to see how bland he was in that movie.
Yeah, in this one, he's another dude amongst a bunch of dudes. Mm-hmm. And in pretty much every other role for like the rest of his entire life, Gene Wilder is, holy crap, it's Gene Wilder. Whether it's Willy Wonka or the Mel Brooks films that he's done, or even See No Evil, Speak No Evil, or whatever the hell that is.
Hear No Evil, Hear No Evil.
Same thing, yeah. Speak no evil, taste no evil, whatever that movie is.
But, pay no evil.
But Gene Wilder does kind of fall flat here, and it's a shame.
And lastly, Mr. Goss, what were your feelings on the whole casting? You are, when it comes to the balancing of the scales, you were definitely in favor of this movie.
Oh yeah, because I'm a huge fan of this movie, and I think that they did a pretty good job on casting. And I know a lot of people were like, on this panel saying that they should have had Richard Pryor playing sheriff, or playing Bart, that is. But the thing is, when you really look at Cleveland Little, who played that character, he did it with such a seriousness, and I think that was kind of smart on their part to have him to play that role, because if they would have had Richard Pryor playing that character, I really don't know if people would have taken the whole movie that seriously. That's what my feeling is on that. But I think it was pretty smart that they got Cleveland Little in there to fill that role. It's just something about it. He just brings such charisma to that character that just kind of just sells you on it. Or at least it sold me very well. But in terms of Gene Wilder playing the Waco Kid, he was a second choice because what had happened, and I remember this from the commentary, that they were bringing, they had this older actor who was going to be playing that part because they wanted originally to have an older person to play this washed-up, drunken, old, has-been gunslinger. And I believe that actor's name was Gig Young. And I remember hearing on the commentary that he became extremely sick on the set, and they had to shut down production that day. And I guess later that day, Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks got into a phone conversation, and they were talking about that situation. And Gene was like, "Well, I can come in. My schedule's pretty open. I can come in and I can play this role." And Mel was like, "I don't know. I appreciate it, but you're a bit too young for this role." This is lock him on. Let me give me a chance. And they brought him in, and we know him as the Waco Kid.
I don't. In terms of that role, I don't think that role defined him, in a sense. I just, I understand what you're saying, Travis, and also the whole thing about it. The film itself was supposed to be a comedy, And when you have a serious actor playing a serious role in a comedy, that very rarely works out.
But at the same time, the way I view it is, wait, are you referring to Cleveland Little?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of like serious actors who become part of a comedy film and all that because they come into this role with such passion for it, and they try to bring as much charisma to it, like I said before. And I think for Cleveland Little, I just think that it was a good choice to put him in there. I mean, when I look back on it and think about how Richard Pryor would have played that character, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know if it would have been as popular as it is now. But I'm just saying that I think they did a pretty good casting job for casting that character and everybody else who was in this film.
To break away from casting for a little bit and to give you some fun facts or trivia about the movie, the budget that was allotted to the film was $2.6 million, and the box office saw about $1.1 million profit. The runtime's 95 minutes, and one thing that it did do is it got a lot of awards and honors. He was nominated for 3 Oscars, Best Actress in a Supporting Role for Madeline Kahn, Best Film Editing, and Best Music Original Song. It's also earned 2 BAFTA Award nominations for Best Newcomer, Cleveland Little, the guy that we 3 out of 4 said Richard Pryor should replace, or at least thought it would be a better decision, and Best Screenplay. Before we wrap up Blazing Saddles part of our conversation this evening, I'd like to go around the horn, talk to each of one of our panelists, and just give us your funny moment or something that stuck out from the movie for you. We'll start with you, Mr. Mango.
I did love the singing scene at the beginning. I loved when Mongo punches the horse in the face. That's probably my favorite part of the whole thing. And I really loved when the sheriff holds himself hostage, which, funny enough, if you look under the IMDb trivia, which is something that I'm guilty of doing for every movie that I watch, that is actually a reference to Mel Brooks holding up a store with a water pistol as a kid.
Oh. There you go. Fun facts. Mr. Burhan, what was your favorite moment or takeaway moment from this film?
I had none. Tell the truth.
There you go. Mr. Goss, favorite moment, takeaway moments? This is one of your favorite movies?
Well, we've already referenced the fart scene, but I kind of like towards the end of the Rory, they have a big fight scene where it spills into the other movie studios, the other lots there on Warner Brothers.
Okay, and lastly, Mr. Paden, any takeaways, funny moments, or things that you thought were just god-awful?
Well, I'm going to give a couple positives before we go out on this one. First off, let me just give one shout-out to the set designs and costumes. If I want to give any positive notes to this movie, I think they really did a fantastic job making it look like the Old West with the buildings, the saloons, even the governor's office, the woodwork they had in the walls was fantastic. The costumes looked great. I think they did a smash-up job with that. As far as my favorite funny moments, I have 2. One of them is when the sheriff first showed up and everyone had their guns drawn to him, and he pulled out his gun and he held it up to him. He's like, if anybody tries to make a move, I'm going to shoot this guy. Thought that was really funny. And I think the other one I would say is specifically when they're doing specifically a part inside when they're doing that fight that's going across the entire lot. When they're getting to those ones where the top hat dancers are going and the director just comes in, cut, no, it's like this. And he does it, and then just as he's finishing, he hits his last step and he falls back into this pool of water. And he just gets up, he huffs, he's like, got it?
Well, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us and talking to us with the Blazing Saddles portion of For Real Movie Club. If you're listening to us on the archive sessions, make sure you check out the next video as we fast forward 10 months and 8 days to the next film in 1974, Young Frankenstein.